I want to talk to somebody today who is tired of waiting. Not tired of God, not angry, just tired. Because there is a specific kind of exhaustion that comes when you have been faithful, you have been praying, you have done everything right, and the answer still has not come. And the longer it goes, the more you start to wonder if maybe God just does not see your situation the way you see it. That is a hard place to be, and I think more people in this room or watching this right now are in that place than we usually admit out loud. Waiting on God is not like other kinds of waiting. When you wait in traffic, the worst that happens is you are late. When you wait on God, you are waiting with something that actually matters to you. A relationship, a diagnosis, a child who walked away, a season of life that just will not turn. And the silence feels personal. That is what gets people. Not just the delay, but how quiet heaven feels when the thing you are asking for is the thing closest to your heart. Isaiah chapter 40 verse 31 says, and I want us to really hear this today, not just nod at it. But they that wait upon the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall mount up with wings as eagles. Now before we celebrate that verse, I need you to see who God was talking to. A few lines earlier, verse 27, the people said, my way is hidden from the Lord. These were not people who had just started praying. These were people who had been waiting so long they felt invisible to God. That is the context. That is who this promise was given to. So if you are sitting there today feeling like God has forgotten your address, this verse was written for you specifically. Let's stay here a while because I do not want to rush past this. The part 1, waiting hurts, because it reveals what we were really leaning on. I want to ask you something, and I want you to really think about it before you answer. When this season of waiting finally ends, when God moves, when the answer comes, what is the first thing you are going to feel? Relief? Peace? Joy? Probably. But I think for a lot of people the honest answer is control. The feeling of knowing again. The feeling that life is back on a track you can see. And that tells us something. Because waiting has a way of exposing what our hearts were actually holding on to. Not in a cruel way, but in the way that an X-ray shows you what is underneath the surface, things you did not even know were there. We say, I trust God, and most of the time we mean it. But underneath that trust, there can also be something else. A timeline we had in our head, a picture of how this was supposed to go. A quiet confidence that if we prayed and believed and did the right things, life would cooperate. And then it does not. The door stays closed, the person does not change, the situation just sits there. And we are surprised by how much it hurts. Not just the circumstance, but the loss of the feeling that we knew what God was doing. I think about a man leaning against a wall. From a distance, he looks steady, strong even. But the moment that wall is removed, you find out something. He was not standing on his own legs. He was resting on the wall. A lot of us are spiritually like that. And the waiting is God not removing the wall to punish us, but to show us what our legs have actually been doing this whole time. This is why Isaiah 40:31 is so specific in its language. It does not say, they that wait upon the answer shall renew their strength. It says, they that wait upon the Lord. That one word is doing a lot of work. Because it is possible to go through a whole season of waiting and never actually be waiting on God. You are waiting on the phone call, watching the calendar, refreshing the situation to see if anything has changed. And your peace rises and falls every single day based on what you see. God is saying something different. He is saying, look at me, not because the answer does not matter. It does. But he wants to be the thing your soul is anchored to, not the movement of your circumstances. So sometimes the waiting is not just asking, do you believe I can do this? It is asking something quieter, something harder. Can you still lean on me when I have not done it yet? That is where faith stops being a feeling and becomes something more like a decision. A tired soul that wakes up and says, Lord, I do not understand this, but I am still here. Part 2, Isaiah 40 was spoken to people who felt forgotten. Not to people who felt strong. I have to be honest with you about something before we go further. Isaiah 40:31 is one of the most quoted verses in Christian culture. You have seen it on Instagram. You have seen it on those little wooden signs people hang in their living rooms. Maybe you have it on a mug somewhere. I am not judging. I probably do too. And there is nothing wrong with that. It is a beautiful verse. But here is what happens when a verse gets that familiar. We start to hear the promise without feeling the room it was first spoken into. Because Isaiah 40 was not written for a Sunday morning when everything feels good and the worship team is hitting every note. It was written for people who were tired, people who had been waiting so long that their faith had started to quietly bend under the weight. Look at verse 27, just a few lines before the eagles. The people say, "My way is hidden from the Lord, and my judgment is passed over from my God." Read that slowly. They are not saying God does not exist. They are saying something more painful than that. They are saying God sees other people's situations. He just does not see mine anymore. I have talked to people who felt exactly that. They would never say it in a testimony, but in a quiet moment you could hear it. The way they talked about prayer like it was something they used to do with more hope. The way they still believed God moves, just not necessarily in their direction. And maybe you know that feeling. Not doubt exactly. Something more like distance. Like you are still in the room, but somehow you ended up in the back corner, and you are not sure God's eyes have found you lately. Notice what God does in response to that. He does not correct them first. He does not say, "That is theologically inaccurate." He lifts their eyes. Have you not known? Have you not heard? The Lord is the everlasting God, the creator of the ends of the earth. He does not faint or grow weary. There is something almost tender about that. God is saying, "I know you are exhausted, but I need you to remember something. I am not exhausted with you. Your strength has run low. His has not. Your understanding has a ceiling. His does not. You are tired from the road, but he has not grown tired of carrying you on it." That is the context for verse 30. So when it says, "They that wait upon the Lord shall renew their strength," this is not a motivational poster for people who already feel strong. This is God speaking directly into the weariness, into the quiet, into the place where you stopped bringing up that one prayer because it hurt too much to keep hoping out loud. Your weariness does not disqualify you from this promise. If anything, this promise was made for the weary. The people who thought strong faith meant never feeling this way, they have it backwards. The verse was given to people who were already feeling this way. So do not read Isaiah 40 like a decoration. Read it like God saw where you were sitting, walked across the room, and put his hand on your shoulder, because before he ever talks about eagles and running, he first finds the people who are too tired to do either. And he does not explain the delay. He just makes sure they know he still sees them. Part 3. God's silence feels personal because our prayers are personal. Here is something I have noticed about the kind of waiting that really breaks people. It is never about small things. Nobody comes to me and says, "Pastor, I have been waiting 3 weeks for a parking spot closer to my office, and I am losing my faith." That is not the waiting that takes people to dark places. The waiting that damages people is the waiting that is wrapped around someone they love. A mother is not waiting for a prodigal situation to resolve. She is waiting for her son, the one she rocked to sleep, the one she prayed over before he could even understand words, to come back to God. A husband is not waiting for relational improvement. He is waiting for the woman he married to look at him the way she used to. A person in a hospital room is not waiting on an abstract outcome. They are waiting for breath to get easier, for one report to finally say something good. That is why the silence feels personal, because the prayer is personal. I think about Hannah, and I want to stay here for a moment, because I think we sometimes read her story too quickly. The Bible says she was in bitterness of soul, and prayed unto the Lord, and wept sore. That is not religious language. That is a woman who had been carrying something for years, years of disappointment, years of sitting at that table with an ache nobody else could fully enter. And Eli, the priest, looked at her praying and thought she was drunk. That is how undone she was. Her pain had no more dignified container. It was just coming out of her. And God did not turn away from that. I want you to hear that, because I think some of you have been apologizing to God for how much your prayer hurts. Like if you were stronger, you would bring it to him more calmly, more composed, with more theological precision. But Hannah did not have composure. She had tears and a broken sentence and years of unanswered longing, and God received it. So if your waiting feels personal, if the silence feels like it has your name on it, that is not a sign you are failing. It may actually be a sign that love is involved, that something sacred is at stake, that this prayer is not casual, and God knows it is not casual. Now I know what some of you are sitting with right now. You are not questioning whether God answers prayer in general. You believe he does. You have seen it. You have stories. What you are quietly wondering is whether he is still paying attention to this one. Psalm 56:8 says that God keeps our tears in a bottle, every one of them. That is a strange image, but what it means is that nothing falls into nothingness. No whispered prayer evaporates into the ceiling. No 2 a.m. cry goes unheard, just because no one else was awake to witness it. You are not hurting unseen. The waiting has not made you invisible. If anything, God sees the weight of it more clearly than you know how to carry it. And that does not make the silence easier to explain. I am not going to pretend it does. But there is a difference between silence and absence, and sometimes the most faithful thing a waiting person can do is refuse to let those two things mean the same thing. Part 4. When the promise is real, but the years keep passing. I want to talk about a specific kind of waiting, because I think it is the hardest kind. It is not the waiting of someone who has no promise. That is hard, but this is harder. It is the waiting of someone who has a promise, who has heard clearly from God, who has held on to a word and then watched years go by as if God had forgotten he said it. Abraham knew this. God told Abraham he would have a son. That was not a feeling. That was not positive thinking. That was the word of the Lord spoken directly to this man. And then came the silence. Not a week of silence, not a month, years, ordinary mornings, aging bodies, and Sarah still with no child. I want you to sit with Sarah for a moment, because I think we skip past her too quickly. She was not just waiting for a baby. She was a woman living in a culture where barrenness was not just a private grief, it was a public identity. Every year that passed did not only test her faith, it touched something in her that was harder to name, her sense of worth, her place, the quiet wondering of, is something wrong with me? Has God somehow passed over this part of my life? That is not ancient history. That is someone in this room right now, maybe not waiting for Isaac, but waiting for something God said, a calling that has not opened yet, a relationship that has not healed, a season of restoration that was supposed to come by now. And the hardest part is not the waiting itself. It is watching everyone else move forward while you are standing in the same place with the same prayer. Birthdays pass. Friends get the thing you are still asking for, and you celebrate with them. Genuinely, you do. But later, when it is quiet, your heart says something you would never say in a testimony. Lord, what about me? That is a real prayer, and I believe God hears it as clearly as any other. Now look at Joseph. Joseph had dreams from God, vivid, specific dreams. And then look at what happened. The pit, slavery, prison. If you had found Joseph in that prison cell and described his dreams to him, it would have seemed almost cruel. This is the man God said would lead. This is the road to the palace. But here is what I want you to see. The prison did not cancel Joseph's dream. It refined the man who would carry it. Because a man who goes from his father's favorite directly to the throne, that man is dangerous. He has never had to trust anything he could not see. He has never had to hold on to something while everything around him said it was foolish to keep holding. But a man who survives the pit, survives slavery, survives false accusation, survives years of waiting on a promise that looked absolutely dead. That man can stand before Pharaoh and not be destroyed by it. That man has been somewhere. You can see it in him. God was not only preparing a position for Joseph, he was preparing Joseph for the position. And I think that is one of the truest things I can say today. God is not only working on what you are waiting for, he is working on who you are becoming in the middle of the wait. That does not make the years easier to explain. I am not going to tell you, just trust the process, like this is some kind of spiritual self-help program. The years are real, the ache is real, the wondering is real. But what if the waiting is not a pause in your story? What if it is actually one of the most important chapters in it? Part 5. The eagle does not escape the wind. It learns to rise on it. Now I want to show you something in this image that I think we miss when we read it too fast. They shall mount up with wings as eagles. That is a beautiful line, but stay with it for a moment. An eagle does not rise because the wind stops. It rises because it knows what to do with the wind. The same current that would send a smaller bird spinning, the eagle catches it, spreads its wings, and goes up. It is not fighting the wind. It is not panicking. It is not flapping until it has nothing left. It is using the very thing that should have pushed it down to carry it higher. And I think that is the picture God is painting for the person who is waiting. We pray, Lord, remove the wind, and sometimes he does. But sometimes, more often than we want, he says something quieter. I am going to teach you how to rise on it. That is a harder answer to receive, because we wanted the situation to change. We wanted the pressure to lift. We wanted the delay to end. But look at what Isaiah 49:20 actually promises. It does not say, they that wait upon the Lord shall receive the answer by morning. It does not say, they shall finally understand why. It says they shall renew their strength. That means the first miracle may not happen around you. It may happen in you. The door may still be closed, but something in you has stopped panicking every time you walk past it. The answer may still be delayed, but the bitterness that was starting to take root has somehow loosened its grip. The road is still long, but you woke up this morning, and you are still here, and you are still praying, and by the mercy of God you have strength for one more step. Do not call that small. We have a tendency to only call something a miracle when the mountain moves, but there is also a miracle when the mountain is still there, and you are still standing with God. That is real, that counts, that is the renewing of strength. Now I want to ask you something honest before we close this section. Think about where you were 1 year ago with this thing you are carrying. Not whether it has been answered yet, just who were you in it? How did you pray about it then, compared to how you pray about it now? Because sometimes the evidence of God's work is not in the circumstance, it is in you. A little more honest with God than you used to be, a little less controlled by what you cannot control. Holding on not perfectly, but still holding, that may be renewal, quiet. Not dramatic, but real. The eagle does not escape the wind. It rises because something beneath it, something it did not manufacture, something it cannot fully explain, is holding it up. And if you are still here today, still praying this prayer, still turning your face toward God, still taking the next step, even when your heart is exhausted, then I want to say something to you directly. You are not as weak as you think you are. Something is holding you. And that something has a name. Part 6. The holiest waiting can still be painful. Not every moment of waiting looks like an eagle rising. Sometimes waiting looks like a person kneeling on the floor at midnight, too tired to find the right words, praying something that barely holds together. And they are not rising. They are just still there, still holding on, with everything they have left. And I want to speak to that person specifically today, because I think there is a version of this message that could leave someone feeling worse than when they came in. Like I heard about the eagle, and I do not feel like an eagle. I feel like I am barely keeping my wings from folding. So I need to take you somewhere. Gethsemane. The night before the cross, Jesus went into a garden with his disciples, and the Bible says something that I do not think we sit with long enough. It says, he began to be sorrowful and very heavy. He told his disciples, my soul is exceeding sorrowful, even unto death. That is the Son of God speaking, not pretending, not performing calm for the sake of those around him, not saying, I am fine, I trust the Father, everything is under control. He said, my soul is sorrowful, even unto death. And then he went a little further, fell on his face and prayed, Father, if it be possible, let this cup pass from me. I want you to stay in that sentence for a moment. Jesus asked for a different way. The eternal Son of God, in the dark alone while his friends slept, asked the Father if there was another road. That was not weakness. That was not failure of faith. That was the most honest prayer ever prayed by human lips. And then came the surrender. Nevertheless, not as I will, but as thou wilt. We tend to read that second line and skip the first, but they belong together. The nevertheless only means something because the asking was real. The surrender was not easy. It was not a calm, composed theological statement. It was spoken in a garden, in the dark, while the cross was getting closer, with sweat like drops of blood falling to the ground. That is what holy obedience can look like. So if you have trusted God with a shaking voice, that is still trust. If you have said, "Your will be done," while tears were falling, that is still surrender. If the most honest prayer you could bring today was not polished, not composed, but broken, God has not turned away from it. Sometimes the most faithful prayer is not a beautiful one. It is just a true one. Jesus did not watch us struggle from a safe distance and send down instructions. He came here. He entered this. He knows what it is to be in the dark garden with the weight pressing down and the answer not feeling like relief. He knows. And that word, "he knows," is not a small comfort if you will let it be real. So do not be ashamed of where you are in the waiting. Do not perform strength you do not have. Do not apologize to God for how much it hurts. Bring him what is actually in your hands. Even if it is just, "Lord, I do not have much today, but I am still here." That is enough to work with, because the one who asks you to wait is the same one who knelt in Gethsemane. He is not asking you to go somewhere he has never been.
Conclusion?
So maybe tonight the answer is not to pretend the waiting does not hurt. Maybe the answer is to bring that hurt honestly before the Lord. Not dressed up, not made to sound more spiritual than it really feels. Just honestly, "Lord, I am still waiting, and I am tired, but I am still here." That is faith. Not a loud song, not a perfect smile, just a soul that keeps turning toward God when it would be easier to turn away. I want you to hear something before you leave today. Waiting on God does not mean you have been forgotten. It does not mean heaven has misplaced your prayer. There are things God is doing that cannot be measured by how fast your circumstances change. A root grows where no one can see it. But without that hidden root, the tree cannot stand when the wind comes. Maybe that is what this season is. God growing something in you, deep, quiet, out of sight, that will hold you when life shakes harder than you expected. Isaiah says, "They that wait upon the Lord shall renew their strength." And I want you to know, renewal does not always begin with wings. Sometimes it begins smaller than that. Strength to pray, one more honest prayer. Strength to get out of bed. Strength to not become bitter. Strength to keep doing the next right thing while your heart is still waiting for the larger answer. Do not despise that. Heaven sees it. Heaven sees the mother who is still praying for her child. Heaven sees the person still choosing integrity in a season of disappointment. Heaven sees the wounded heart that has not stopped looking toward the Lord. The Father is not far from that place. So keep waiting, but do not wait like an orphan. Wait like a child whose father may be quiet, but has not left the room. Small faith placed in a great God is still held by mighty hands. Take the next step, not the whole road, just the next step, and may the Lord meet you there.